Thanks for coming this morning. We know this is a lot of time on your schedule. Hopefully you'll find a couple of things that are actually valuable and interesting today. With that said, let's get right in. Identity really is the bedrock of everyone's business, right? It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how you work. To get to any service or device, you're coming through an identity system, right? Identity really is unique. It's not like a network. It doesn't become that disaggregated and fragmented as networks do. It really is that bridge everything has to cross. And when you go back to kind of how we got started 5 years ago, that was one of the key insights, was I can look to secure an organization. I can look to try and tie down all of these sources of breach. But in terms of maximum leverage, and the one point that really gives me maximum visibility and maximal control, it really is an identity system. And for those of you who haven't heard this story, way back when, in a previous life, I used to work with cyber insurance vendors. This is when I was at a company called Security Scorecard. And we used to do these mathematical analyses of what statistical correlation exists between security controls and breach, right? Or from the cyber insurance crowd, they didn't even care if it was a breach. They just cared if they had to actually write a check back out, right? They want your money, they don't want to give it back. You all know this. And there were like 2,000 signals that we analyzed, and most of it was garbage. But the 4 signals that were really, really strong was, how do you manage your password? Do you have 2FA? Do you have patch management? How do you manage privilege? Those 4 signals were the strongest signals in terms of if you're not doing anything here, bad things are going to happen. And I ran into Nelson and a guy named Mike Clark and Jim and TJ, and about that time, and they were on this go to create this passwordless authentication technology. They wanted to be able to log in without actually having to use a password. Nelson had realized that every device, for the most part, now has an enclave, so you can create a key in it. Key can't move. Remember that concept? We'll come back to it. It's actually kind of a key, important, no pun intended. It's an important component of pretty much everything that we're going to talk about. But one of the interesting properties of what they had done was their authenticator worked from the device that you were actually working from. This doesn't always hit rain when I say that. We've all been trained to log into a thing on our laptop and pull out a device or pull out our phone. This authenticator works from your laptop if you're working on your laptop. You don't pull anything out. It works from your phone if you're working on your phone. You don't have to switch to another device. It's a single device, multi-factor. And by being on the device that you're working from, a couple of other things then become easy. We go back to those 4 signals, right? How do you manage password? How do you manage 2FA? Do you manage patch management and privilege? If I'm on the device that you're working from, I can now actually comment on the security status, the compliance, and the posture of the device itself. And another interesting and elegant thing is the team had figured out how to do this in a way that didn't even require privilege. So this authenticator was like an unprivileged wallet. It didn't really need administrative privilege. It wasn't actually this MDM style software that had this cloud over your head that could remote wipe your devices. And so our early customers deployed this on both managed devices and BYOD, because it was really just like, oh, I no longer use Authy, I use this. I no longer use Duo, I use this. And all of a sudden, we started to see that not only can we comment on who, from what device, but under what security constraints of that device at the time of access. Or put it another way, depending on what you're trying to access, are you the right person working from the right device with the right security controls relative to the data it serves? That was really kind of the founding insight. We realized if we did that, we could knock off the top 4. And by knocking off the top 4, we thought that would really point to outcomes. And the whole point of this slide, identity is failing. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But you pick a breach that you've read about in the last 12 months, and as long as you pick 5 breaches, I'll bet you money, right? Statistics. I'll bet you money that most of those breaches were actually caused by a failure of the identity system. And actually, I'll make this bet right now. You pick 5 breaches, right? Because the statistics show it's something like 8 or 9 out of 10, or 4 out of 5. All go through the identity system in a pretty interesting way. And if you're like really anyone that shows up in these reports, whether it's Verizon, DVIR, or who was the other one that did the analysis? Actually, CrowdStrike and Mandiant, right? They did their reports at the end of last year as well. If you're like them, you probably are, right? Because their numbers are like 82 and 87% of respondents. This may be familiar, right? The amount of phishing incidents, whether it's phishing to a fraudulent site, whether it's phishing to a fraudulent site with push bomb, whether it's phishing to a fraudulent site with a man in the middle or man in the browser, to actually things that don't even worry about that, right? They just essentially use credential dumps, start logging into things, and know that at some point you're going to get really bored because the Netflix show is getting really, really good, and you just want your phone to stop chirping. If you are like most of the people in this organization, you have managed devices and you have unmanaged devices. And the typical way this discussion goes, when I talk to a lot of customers, the typical way it goes is like, about half people say, oh no, we don't have managed devices. They're like, oh wow, that's interesting. You're very unlike most people. Tell me about your CTO. Like, oh, he has an exception. Oh, okay, I'm sure that's the only one. Wait a minute, do you have PR? Do you have design consultants? Yeah. Aren't they contractors? Yeah, do you manage your devices? No, we don't. You have a substantial software engineering team? Yeah. 100% of them are employees? Well, no, they're not. Okay, so we're not really arguing whether you have unmanaged devices. Maybe we're arguing about who's managing those devices, but it's certainly not you, right? And that's a real problem, right? Like we've talked to some of you, and there's clear and present objectives in some of your organizations around solving that. Compliance is another thing that has really changed in the last 24 months. Whether we're talking US federal government, so in Trump White House 1, there was an executive order. I forget the actual numbering, but the gist of it was, if you're a federal agency, thou shalt phish resist. And then they go on to actually explain what phish resist means, and they say it should be continuous, and it should do this, and it should use AL2 or stronger token binding, and blah, blah, blah. If you are in the retail space, PCI DSS 4 is requiring you to do very similar things. If you're in finance, NYDFS is arguing to do similar things. If you are paying attention to California Data Protection's re-rev that's happening right now, it's going to ask you to do similar things. And so we see a lot of customers trying to figure out, all right, how do I understand posture? How do I understand phish resistance on all devices, whether I manage them or not? And this old school thing that we used to do through third-party risk management, rank surveys, probably not going to cut it. Like, is there any way for me to do it at the time of access? And zero trust is always kind of a touchy word. Sometimes it's like, yeah, we have a zero trust initiative installed because of this, and sometimes it's like, zero trust isn't that what I just, I put that sticker on my laptop. It's not really a real thing for me. But at the core of zero trust is, how do I have the minimal set of assumptions possible where everything that I'm doing, from whether it's preventative, right, security architecture, to after the fact, security operations and response, I have some sort of chain of reasoning to where I can always have a minimal set of assumptions to really understand what's going on, what the blast radius is, and how to do something about it. Again, I'm going to bring it back to, if you actually have phish-resistant device-bound identity that actually is posture-aware, a lot of these things become much, much simpler. And we're not selling a magic pill that doesn't solve 100% of your problems, but a lot of controls get wiped off the table when you actually have the right architecture. And if you can make 70 to 80% of your problems go away, what that generally means is now I can focus on the next set of problems. I can move on. I can redeploy resources, which is generally a pretty good thing. Okay, this was the result of me having fun one night. I like math. I like fun. Taka taka. Okay, so we have a partnership with a company called KnowBe4. You all know KnowBe4 Phish Training. KnowBe4 does a lot of interesting statistics around what is the likelihood of a trained versus untrained organization clicking through on a phishing link, right? And what KnowBe4 comes back and, well, actually the slide's different now, so I'm giving away the punchline. So this is a curve, and this is just what's called a geometric probability distribution. And you can think of it as, if you're flipping a coin, what are the odds that you flip 5 heads in a row and then tails, right? That's all a geometric distribution is. So if I know the probability of somebody clicking through clicking through a phishing link, I can then very clearly model out what's the probability of experiencing an incident. can't model really if it's going to turn into a breach, right? That's depends on controls and responsiveness and training and a bunch of other stuff. But incidents equal time and effort and money, right? We want to lower our incidents. So it's actually pretty trivial to model. What is the likelihood that I'm going to get an incident? And so we took this formula we just plugged in. Let's say that our user base will click half of every phishing link that's sent to them. Well, it turns out I have a 90% chance of having an incident with only 8 phishing attempts sent. 8 unique phishing attempts sent, right? Simple math. So, does that sound like you? Do you think 1 in 8 is going to click the link? Most people say no, right? Most people think they're like on the high side of the standard distribution curve, right? Isn't it crazy that like half the world is only average?
We're all better than that.
We're all better than that. All right. Well, now, what happens if I change this a bit? What happens if I look? Oh. What happens if I lower the rate? What if I say, you know what, it's really only 1 in 10. Only 1 in 10 people are actually going to click that bad link. How does that change my odds of experiencing a security incident? Well, now it takes 22 unique attempts to get a 90% probability of experiencing a security incident. Those don't really sound like big numbers, right? What if I raise it to world class as reported by KnowBe4? Across all of KnowBe4's customers, they're 90th percentile, right? Top of the class, top marks, 4%, right? So a little bit better than 1 in 20 is a click-through rate of world class, right? Keep in mind, this is email phish training. We now know phishing can happen across all sorts of media, right? It's not just email, it's text messages, it's Discord channels, it's Zoom chats, it's all of these things that basically have no locks on the door, that as a modern business trying to keep up and working with all of these third parties, your people are in whether you're monitoring or not, right? So in a world-class organization, 56 unique attempts is all it takes to have a 90% certainty that I'm going to experience a security incident. Do you think this is a big number? In the world where 5 seconds on ChatGPT and I can sound like you, 15 seconds of sampling off of YouTube, and I can actually sound and look like you. Is 56 really a big number? Right? I get this question about AI all the time. Hey, what are you guys doing with AI? It's like, all right, so number one, I'm going to show my nerd skills. You all know the card chef scale, clearly. But let's say we have this scale of 1, 2, and 3. Like, what is the level of AI sophistication of an organization? Like, level 1 is like, we're using AI to just do our jobs better, right? I use AI to copy it. I use AI to pull together test harnesses for code, to write basic test scripts. That's like a level 1. Level 2 is, wait a minute, I realize that like with AI, I can give my customers a chatbot. I can tie that chatbot essentially into my baseline data lake, as well as API calls. And the chatbot can actually just synthesize UI components on the fly as the customer's asking questions. Maybe a little bit clunky, but you can basically poke at everything you want. I can see what's going on. So I'm kind of building different, right? Like that's kind of like level 2. And then level 3 is like we're experiencing it differently. I would argue most organizations are on their way to level 1. I would argue adversaries are already at level 2. And what does that mean? They're already using large language models to write like you, to sound like you, to look like you, right? So 56 is not only at a small number in the old world, but the world has changed. So this comes back to my bet, where I was basically saying earlier, almost all of these breaches really start with your identity system. Your identity system is failing. We can kind of go through a bunch of examples in a little bit, but here we're just pulling from the Mandiant threat report at the end of 2024. And it doesn't take much to go through and basically see, all right, what are they doing? Well, I can steal credentials. If I don't want to steal them, I can buy them. If I already have a credential, or even if I don't have a credential, I can man in the middle you pretty easily. I can man in the browser you pretty easily now, right? It used to require a little bit of thought. People had to understand this crazy thing called HTTP or JavaScript. But like now, evil Gen X version 3 will like take that concern off. 10 years ago, we all had Metasploit, right? Metasploit basically brought what we thought was advanced techniques to the script kiddies. Now evil Gen X is doing that exact same thing for identity-based phishing attacks. And so we go through these things, and there's really kind of two big buckets, and within those big buckets, there's smaller buckets. So credential-based vectors, we just kind of went through a couple of them. But ultimately, there's a ton of device vectors that also have to do with identity. Why did you let that device connect that didn't have your control on it? Why did you let that device connect? Maybe it was clearly vulnerable to the CVE that's been known about for a while. Wait a minute, aren't you FedRAMP moderate? Don't you have some sort of Kanban or Kanban requirement there? Like, that's clearly not a device that is suitable to cross this boundary. Why was it allowed in? And this is just to drill down the point. Modern identity is not just about the person. It's also about the device, the person bound to the device. So what are the root causes of a lot of these incidents? And the first one that, are they actually lighting up? Or do they not light up?
They're faintly light. I can see a sort of on.
Dude, do you feel like you're at the eye doctor right now? So trust me, there's a 1 there off to the left. It does feel like the eye doctor, right? Where they lower the thing and they're trying to figure out where your threshold is.
Depends on your age.
Yeah, age sucks. Okay, so trust me, there's a 1 over there. And what it talks about is credential movement. So we argue the #1 cause of a lot of identity-based incidents, security incidents, is actually credential movement. This may sound funny. What do you mean by credential movement? Well, when we talk about a password, when we talk about really any symmetric credential, by definition, we're talking about a secret that you know and I know, right? A password is a symmetric credential. But there's a ton of other symmetric credentials. 99% of you probably have some sort of web service that your customers are using or that your own applications are using. There's an API token that the client side of that is using. Only 1% of these services actually use HMAC properly for API key-based authentication. The other 99% treat it like a secret. Can you present this? The only real controls are like salting and hashing on the back end, which have nothing to do with any of these modern threats, right? Right? That's really just about like database compromise. And so we dig in. Oh, and the final thing, of course, is your developers are like, they're relying on the privacy of TLS to provide their security, right? Now, your developers are probably, I'm editing how I normally talk about this. Your developers want to go fast, right? And they want to use all the tools within their repertoire to go fast. So at some point, they probably wanted to run it in a kube cluster, right? Well, a kube cluster needs this thing called a service mesh, which is really just a fancy application load balancer. Did they manage it? Probably not. They're probably using a third party, right? That service mesh may be coming off of, your developers, they want to stay up to date. And you know what? The Kafka message bus, at least 5 years ago, it's probably something you know, was really up to date, right? I can use this Kafka message bus and I can kind of decouple the input rate from the output rate. And that's how you get like horizontal cloud scaling. And I want to be like Twitter. And that's what they do, so I'm going to do it. And so they may have introduced this, right? Did they manage it? It's probably an Amazon managed service, or a Google managed service, or maybe even a startup managed Kafka buffer. They're definitely using an application load balancer, whatever cloud infrastructure they're in, right? You're probably also using content distribution networks, right? And some of you, if you're enterprise, you may even have some sort of reverse proxy set up within your perimeter, right? And if you're using any of the modern services like Zscaler or Palo Alto's, what do they call it, Cortex? I forget what the product name is. Everything I just listed opens up the TLS connection. Every place where your developers are trusting API security, privacy layer to the TLS connection, you now have 4 to 7 third parties pretty much inspecting this. So your surface area is now their surface area. Your insider threat is now their insider threat. And before you jump to saying, well, that's not something I can worry about, so let's move on, how many people actually remember Cloudbleed and what Cloudbleed actually was, right? So Cloudflare's eating the world, right? They fulfill this, well, they do a lot more than CTO today, but that's kind of how they got started. And Cloudly was, I think it was 2017. And without getting into the details, I'd love to get into the details, but not. Without getting into the details, if you send a certain crafted packet to Cloudflare, you got a, was it a 2048 or 4096 byte dump? What does that sound like? It sounds like a page size. What page size that you got was a page dump from someone else's memory that happened to be on that same box. Put another way, you got to read someone else's HTTP session by just sending a specializedly crafted packet. And the short answer is just somebody screwed up, right? Your developers make mistakes all the time. But this is an example of, again, where just what you think you're getting from your infrastructure, you're not actually getting. So we get back to, we were arguing about like movement itself is bad. Symmetric secrets that move are bad. The reason they're bad is when they move, by definition, they're touching memory in every system they go to. Whenever they touch memory, they leave a shadow of themselves. That is almost impossible to track, and certainly impossible to defend. A password, by definition, only lives in your brain and the servers you're connected to. It has to move. These API keys that we talked about have to move when they're implemented that way. If there was a way to engineer authentication where it did not have to move, then I've kind of changed the architecture in a way where I no longer have to worry about that as a vector, right? So what if a credential didn't have to move? Then that boundary shrinks down, right? Clearly, signature-based authentication is a way in which nothing has to move. Now, symmetric signatures exist, and they have for a while. That's what HMAC is. Technically, it has to move in the first time of enrollment. You can do one even better, right? You can go asymmetric. You can actually do something even better than that. You can use enclaves. And with an enclave, you can guarantee it can't move, right? So how many people have an iPhone? How many people have an Android? How many people don't have either of those, right? And you probably have all bought like a sandwich, coffee, breakfast, something with your phone. When you do that, you are doing single device, multi-factor, phish-resistant authentication. The merchant machine sends a bill to your phone wirelessly. The first thing that happens when you look at your phone, if you have a Face ID turned on, a biohash is being created and it's stapled to the end of the receipt. And then a key that cannot move is used to sign over the combination of those two things. And it's presented back to the merchant machine. And it verifies it and says factor one, that possession factor, that key that can't move. Factor two, this biohash ID that I don't really know what the biometric is, but I know that that unique biometric only hashes to this value, and that was proven it was there. That happened in the 20-teens. That was pushed by finance and merchant banking. That ensures that we have this technology in almost all modern electronics you can buy. So you can create credentials that don't move. What's the second major cause? The second major cause is, when we went through all that big long list of vulnerabilities, another way of thinking about it is, here's where we're asking the human to act like a machine, decipher a protocol, and figure out if this is a bad situation. Right? Remember a minute ago we said, like, you're all doomed, right? If it only takes 56 attempts to have a 90% certainty that you're going to have a security incident on a unique phishing attempt, and now we're going to layer AI tools on top of that, like, you're just doomed. So why continue to send humans to fight robots? How do we actually pull the human out of that loop? How do we change that mechanism? That's the number two. And then number three is, if we do come up with a solution, how do we ensure it's universal? It can't just be for your MacBook. It can't just be for your Windows device. It can't just be for your mobile phones. It has to work on Linux. It has to work on Chromebook. It has to really work on all end user computers. And yeah, I tend to do this and jump ahead. But it starts with credentials can't move. So I have this idea at a trade show where we have like a little jail, and we get like an intern and have them dress up like a key and just sit in the jail the whole time. Like really illustrate the key can't leave the device. Because that's what's actually going on. And then marketing's like, yeah, you can't say that in public. Too late. Well, this is in public, right? This is friends. But this is what a secure enclave is. It's almost impossible for you to buy electronics today without it. It has this tiny little jail where you can birth key pairs in that jail, and then you can essentially hand a receipt through the bars, and the key will sign it and hand you the signature back. And it's literally a guarantee that that key cannot actually leave the device. It never even lives in memory on your device. That little processor, it has its own memory, right? It's how TPX works, that's how enclaves work. So that's kind of step one. But just to kind of correlate it to, you know, major incidents, if you've read about any of the typhoon attacks, Salt Typhoon, what's the one that just hit NTT? It's not Salt, it's Salt AT&T, China, NTT China is a different one. Anyway, the gist of it all is credential theft and secrets theft. So with US Treasury, the secret was stolen out of the Beyond Trust vault and used to access US Treasury system. It's suspect, but like we believe that was PLA basically looking at contingency plans for what's the U.S. Commerce's and Treasury's response to a Taiwanese encirclement, right? So they can get ahead of it and, you know, not be Russia when their funds are being shut down. When we look at Salt Typhoon on AT&T, it was actually credential reuse of an SE. One of AT&T's, or no, it wasn't AT&T, it was one of their vendors' SEs was reusing a password that did not have MFA on a privileged system. Yeah, that never happens, right? No, it did happen 7 months ago. Australian service is another, well, I'm getting kind of myself. So yeah, if credential can't move, none of these particular scenarios could have happened in the way they did. The next pillar is how do we remove the human from the loop? Well, remember when I said the authenticator lives on the machine you're working from? That is the necessary component to remove the human from the loop. When we talk about any classic protocol, right? We have the client, we have the server. The protocol is like this, almost like this little computer language, right? And we all agree the client will behave in this way, the server will be in that way. We talk about authentication with passwords. The human kind of acts like the client, right? The browser is almost just a rendering agent. The human has to figure out, all right, is this right? Should I advance? Should I put my thing in? You could change that. You could have something like a digital wallet that lives on the machine someone's actually working from. That digital wallet could actually inspect the challenge, right? I want to log into a service. Service like, all right, prove yourself. Well, the first thing about a man-in-the-middle attack is the adversary is pretending to be that legitimate service, right? And they're acting as a relay. And there's, you know, very obvious ways in which they do it, and there's really subtle ways in which they do it. But it fundamentally happens in the same way. So if that human isn't really able to detect that, why even ask? Could a wallet detect it? Could the challenge itself be signed? Could we do it in a way where we're not dependent upon privacy of the TLS layer to actually guarantee the authenticity of the challenger? Short answer is you absolutely can, right? And this is one of the benefits of moving authentication into a wallet on the device that someone's working from. The final kicker is if you're on that device, now you can comment about the state of that device, right? So it's not just, is it this person operating the device I expect? Is CrowdStrike installed? Is it reporting what I expect? Are the controls I actually expect on this particular Windows machine or this particular Linux machine actually there? We actually had one customer go so far as to use our system to actually interrogate the process. What they did is they followed the process tree and they said, the process that's asking for the authentication, show me what loader loaded it, from which executable, was the executable signed? Do I trust the loader? And was the signer of the executable in my SROM? So clearly that's a very specific application. Most of our customers don't turn the dial that far over, but that's the kind of questions you can actually answer at the time of authentication and recurrently when you're actually on the device. Being on the device is a game changer. Being on the device also says, hey, I don't care, click all the bad links, nothing bad's gonna happen, because that little client protocol being executed by the wallet can figure out when you're being man in the middle. And we actually see this in the wild now. We don't have it for today, but we'll start talking about it probably in the next 6 months, our identity threat intelligence. Those threat intelligence really focused on identity-specific TTPs, and you know, we're not really trying to compete in the threat intelligence space, but we have found that people don't really understand the identity-specific TTPs that threat actors, both criminal and nation states, are actually using in a, I would argue, an unsophisticated way, very successful. Like that you would know about Australian services. I know it's not on the page, but that was in like 6 or 7 months ago. It was believed to be a Chinese threat actor going after the equivalent of, it was like in Australia, it was like a combination of like health and human services and I forget the other agency, but basically it was a big government service agency. And it was, the first stage was a credential harvested from a credential dump of a particular target administrator. And then the second stage was push bomb. They were They were watching apple cider vinegar, and they were really getting into it. And their phone kept chirping. And finally they just said, go away, yes. And then they got in and did what they want. And that was local. Apple cider vinegar is actually an Australian joke. I learned that the other day. Okay. And then part 3, you know, if you don't really think about usability, if you don't think about your end users, this is great. How many of you seen that meme where it's like it talks about security, it's got that bar across the road, and you clearly see the tire tracks just run around the bar. If the experience isn't universal, it's not easy to use. Your users are going to essentially create your next vulnerability. Yep. Okay, a little bit about us. Most of what I've been talking about up until now is really kind of the problem setting, the scale. But you know, the core, if you don't really remember anything about us, and even if you don't end up going with us for your kind of identity and authentication needs, the things that you really ought to do, pick a solution that guarantees your credential can't move. And I don't mean someone gets up on stage and shouts, we guarantee. I mean, like after the fact, you could actually, it's provable by just looking at the log. There's like actually an academic science or mathematics behind all of this that's actually verifiable. Your tech people, you will know, or your tech people will know. Number 2 is it has to be executable from the device someone's working from. If you do not do that, you actually don't solve the problem. And we have a demo that we'll show you during some of the breakouts. Microsoft Authenticator, passwordless with biometric, they claim is phish resistant, is totally phishable in a way where you can hijack a session token. And their argument was, when you bring this up to them, it's like, well, you didn't phish the authentication itself, you phished the redirection off the original channel for session hijacking on the primary machine. And at that point, you're like, all right, I feel like I'm arguing with a lawyer. The point is the same, the session is hijacked, and now I'm in the same spot I started in. You have to be on the machine someone's working from where you cannot actually eliminate session hijacking as an outcome, right? So whether it's us or someone else, credential can't move, gotta be on the machine. Those 2 are musts. And then obviously it needs to cover the, I mean, you'll satisfy the third one. It has to cover the computing things about to use. Oh, and didn't really even say what this slide is about. So clearly we have a solution to everything I've been talking about, but just to give you a bigger picture of what Beyond Identity is and how we work. We're an identity security platform. We plug into your existing IDP to protect you from all these threats I've been talking about. Our customers today use us with Okta, Ping, Azure ADB1 login, and Shibboleth, because we have a university in the room. I don't know if you guys actually use Shibboleth.
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay.
SAML and OpenID Connect.
We also plug into other components in the security ecosystem. So everything I told you about device posture, we actually do natively ourselves. Our authenticator is not just a wallet. You can also think of it like a little mini EDR sensor. But we're not trying to serve the purpose of an EDR. We're just trying to help you understand compliance and risk at the time of access. We do plug into purchases that you probably already made in the MDM front, in the EDR front, and the ZTNA front. And the goal of that is just to enrich your policy decision making. So at the time of access, you can actually use our policy and generate rules, not just over what we see, but what these ecosystem products think about the person at the device, at the time of access, and then also continuously. And there's not enough time to go through all of this. You'll hear from a few people about this later on today, and obviously we've got demo stations to talk through in the other room. But identity really is the choke point for both visibility, control establishment, and enforcement. And when you actually plug it in, we were having this conversation yesterday. It went something along like, remember the SOAR products? And it's like, yeah, it's like, you could almost think of it as like, imagine a SOAR, but what if it was actually effective? So rather than telling you how to chase the fire, what if it actually plugged in to the point where before the fire even started? And that's kind of what we're doing, right? Like we're unifying all of this information at the time of access, and then also continuously, so you can actually prevent the bad thing from happening, as opposed to just going after it. Yeah, I've already said all this. And then I guess we'll just end on the brand promise, and we'll see if this is also an eye test. It might be. Oh, no, this was just a change. So inside of our company, we try and align against one of 3 things. No one's allowed to work on anything unless it kind of adheres to one of the brand promises. Secure by design is the first. This is not secure. We do not mean secure by default. So we think secure by default is kind of like a chintzy, hey, the default configuration, yes, that is true, but it should be a much larger scope of things. So when we say secure by design, we actually mean who do we hire? Like, do we actually staff from organizations that have been both red and blue at the criminal and the nation state level, right? So like, it starts with who we hire. It also flows into how we build. So I don't want to have to make arguments of like, trust us. I actually want to take lessons learned out of formal methods and trusted computing and like this world that has actually transitioned from academia into commercial and federal use cases where you actually have a guarantee that the bad thing is never going to happen. You ever flown an Airbus machine? Surely you all have, right? It's almost impossible to not fly an Airbus. Your pilot's using an autopilot for most of that flight. Did you know the software that actually runs that autopilot was formally proven to never do certain bad things? Like, they actually are using this technology in critical safety and critical infrastructure. And we are now starting to use it in cybersecurity. You can actually use it to guarantee, without having to test every scenario, like of all possible inputs, what is the restricted set of outputs that are actually possible? Or be able to kind of guarantee certain bad things don't happen. So who we hire, how we build, how we deliver, and how we enable our customers to behave a little bit differently. And we actually have a couple people in the room that you may know from the standards world, Sarah, and then Dean and Monty and Crispin who aren't here, but they lead something called TCG, Trusted Computing, as well as IETF, WebAuthn, and some stuff over at FIDO. Although FIDO's been giving us a little bit of heartburn because they've decided their credentials can move. But that's a whole nother discussion. All right, simple to admin. If it's not easy to deploy, it's not going to work. This is something that we've actually just started looking into, and at one point we'll be able to get a demo on deployment. When you think about identity deployments, why do you expect your workforce to be part of the deployment? Isn't that kind of crazy? Like, you're saying my deployment team is the entire company? What other product is that true for? But it's kind of true for authentication. Why? So we actually have a pretty exciting demo that you can see where essentially deployment becomes automatic, at least across any users that have managed devices. So rather than just using the MDM to do lifecycle management of the authenticator, we can also use it to auto-enroll a credential on behalf of the targeted UID of that machine. So the user experience is they go to bed one day, the old experience, they come to work the next day with a completely different experience, and you didn't have to field any help desk tickets on how to make that work. And then finally, easy to use. We feel that this is the first time in a long time where security can actually take barriers out of the end user's way, as opposed to signing them up for a new round of security training. And where's Alan? Raise your hand. Oh no, I call him, this is his moment to go use the bathroom. Our head of design, Alan, is here. I'm sure he's very gregarious, he'll meet him at some point. It's very important to us, very important to him. He's here to kind of talk and share a lot about design changes and how we're making things very, very easy on your users. With that said, today is about why now, right? Because all this sounds interesting, but yeah, why do we want to do this now? And again, the answer is you already have a lot of these problems. You're already struggling with compliance. You're already on a zero trust journey. You already have end user help desk issues. Like, this is a way to move faster through those problems and actually get the security results you want. And if I hit the button again, is it going to start the video?
Give it a go.
No! Yeah, and so you'll hear this a lot. We're calling this identity threat protection. Let's see if we get the video. Here we go.
So this morning we detected unauthorized access. It looks like your product's been compromised. Have any of your customers seen anything?
to transition to product. I'd like to introduce Louis Maraccio. He is our CTO. For those of you that have known him, the CTO is new. And Nikhil is our, you can think of him as our head of product.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Oh, and I left the coffee bottle for you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. As Jason said, you may have seen me running around. I'm now playing the role of CTO. Nikhil runs our product team, and we're going to talk to you about a little bit about sort of 4 of our key differentiators. Some of the things we've delivered and some of the things that are coming, along with some brand new stuff that you'll be able to see at the demo stations over lunch. And if there's one thing I want you to get from this is come see us at the demo station, right? We'll move a little bit fast because I think we're trying to make up some time, but if you do have questions, scream it out. So just to reemphasize, right, going back and tying back to what you heard from Jason, what makes us fundamentally different is we're a security company solving an identity problem. Productivity is important. Your employees have to get to work. Your IT administrators can't spend all their time in the system, but you still have to solve that security problem. So when we look at the first key differentiator, the thing that we really focus on is phishing resistance always. Everywhere where your employees are working, whether it's on Linux, Chromebook, iPhone, Android, it doesn't matter. And then here in the future, all the way down beyond just web access that we'll talk about in just a minute, but always, always, always phishing resistant. Nikhil, why don't you take me through a little bit of what we've done, and we'll talk about what we're announcing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I always like to say is that when you look at Beyond Identity versus some of the other identity access management systems available, with Beyond Identity, you don't have the option to mess up, right? The only authentication factors you can use are phishing resistant MFA always. And so, when we look kind of the way that we've enabled you to use phishing resistance across your ecosystem, it's omni-channel and focused on the use cases where your employees need to do their work. And if you hit the next slide, what we're really excited to talk about today and come talk to us over lunch is we now are adding support for phishing resistant authentication to desktop login where your devices are workstations that multiple people are using, right? Shared workstations. And you can log in with both YubiKeys or hardware keys, as well as the Beyond Identity mobile app, right? And all of your mobile restricted and scenarios where mobile phones are available.
Yeah, I think that what you're going to see from us is a continued focus on expanding the areas where you see Beyond Identity show, because those identity problems are showing up not just at access, they're showing up in the collaboration layer as well. In this particular case, you have an identity problem all the way down to the desktop that people are moving around. They need easy access. So separating that user credential from the device credential, right? So that they're both still there, but that user credential can now roam. In the future, you'll see the same thing with Mac desktop login, right? You'll see the same thing around Chrome OS. You'll see the same thing around VDI and sort of that cascading off down into the systems environment.
Do you want us to ask questions as you go along, or do you want to?
Fire them away, man.
So is this Bluetooth and proximity, or is this IP?
So for hardware tokens, obviously, are hardware tokens. The QR code device is not Bluetooth. You scan the QR code to log in. And the reason why it's not Bluetooth is because, when we've looked at it and we've talked to customers, the thought of managing those Bluetooth stacks across such a diverse population, most folks have said they don't want to do that. And you can control that with policy really well, but it's not something that we wouldn't do.
I'm thinking here about cloud-based virtual machines.
The next thing that we want to talk about from a differentiator perspective is the fact that we go very, very deep when it comes to device posture. Device posture is really where we spend a lot of time and energy to make sure that you can inspect that device, right? Because just like at the airport, it doesn't matter if I just have a boarding pass, if they don't look at my luggage, right? They're not doing their job. So you gotta look at both things when you're making that access grant. Nikhil's gonna tell us about some of the problems that we hear from our customers that they're trying to solve here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, when we, the way to internalize it, I think, you know, what I hear from our customers is, now you're moving away from that knowledge factor and that second device, and you're enabling users to log in with their device. And so what's the most important thing is, what are the tools that I have available to make sure that that device is healthy and meets the security posture and the security compliance requirements that IT and security have set. So, you know, when we look at, you know, capabilities that we've delivered, you know, in the past year, it's really strong integrations with our EDR, MDM partners like CrowdStrike to make sure that all of these security investments that you've already made are working really well together, as well as adding the ability for our own authenticator, if you would like, to actually give you deep visibility on the device. So I think, Lewis, if you hit the next slide here, you know, what's really exciting and what we kept hearing is that, you know, Beyond Identity, you guys are great, right? We've got all of this device posture compliance at time of access, but we actually want visibility into all of the devices that we have that are on the that are managed and unmanaged. And now with our devices, a product line called Device 360 and our kind of devices table capability, as soon as you install this authenticator, we can start to give you visibility into the devices in your environment and the health of this device. You know, is it misconfigured or not? And basically give you a starting point to go and start to fix things if you so choose to want to.
It's important to point out, you may have seen it on the previous slide, device mount session cookies. So when you look at our SSO product, the device identity that we have now in the system, we're working on, we have a working prototype of, it will be released in the future. Now that we're protecting, and we've solved sort of the man in the network problem, man in the middle, the network problem, right? Attackers evolve. So now when they try to steal that session cookie, even if they do, if you're using Beyond Identity, our SSO, it doesn't matter, they can take that, it won't work for them, right? All anchored to our strong device identity. That then leads us to continuous authentication. Kind of like Jason said, continuous is very, very important here. You want to always evaluate that device posture. You want to always evaluate that policy. Over the years, as we've rolled this out, our customers have put it to great use. Nikhil, why don't you tell them a little bit about what we've done and what we're hearing and what we're going to do next?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll just dive right in. Right? You know, when you're trying to achieve zero trust, you know, first step is, right, make sure that the user is who they are and the device is compliant at time of access. But once the user is logged in, this device is still has access on an ongoing basis, right, throughout the life of that session to those resources. And so at any point in time, you want visibility into the health of the device even after the authentication has occurred. And that's where that continuous authentication comes in. You know, with the next slide, what we want to do, you know, this is feedback that we heard directly from our customers and from our IT administrators, is how do we make this information actionable when I need to know? And so what we're really excited and focusing on is meeting you where you guys do your work, in your SIM tools, in all the types of notifications and alertings, in your Teams and Slack and all of your kind of integrations in your work.
You know, and finally, compliance is an enormous driver. Back to Jason and what he said earlier, numerous clients right now are motivated by compliance concerns, whether it be PCI 4, whether it be NYDFS. Those constantly evolving compliance frameworks that need to constantly evolve your authentication and authorization to meet those new controls is a big area of emphasis that we want to make it easy for you. We've heard, you know, as we went through our FedRAMP journey, right? We're now FedRAMP moderate authorized, I think is the right way of saying it. We heard from our partners as part of that, hey, we make it really easy to meet a lot of these controls. In fact, in some cases, they're looking at now using us to help some of their other clients out. But these, you know, using a system that has deterministic guarantees about authentication and authorization allows you to very easily now construct a compliance program that you can get evidence for compliance to those controls very quickly and easily, and we're going to make it even easier.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think, you know, Louis, if you just jump to the next slide, right? You know, what I'll just say is that we heard you, right? A key driver for making an investment in a secure access solution is the compliance requirements and compliance objectives that your business needs to adhere to basically, you know, do your work. You know, what we're really excited to, you know, talk about is, you know, two admin ease of use and admin capabilities to make your life easier, right? And the first is what I like to call self-remediation, where we give you the tools to get your end users to help you keep your endpoints up to date, right? So things like you know, an out-of-date Chrome browser, you know, you can nudge your users to update themselves. And then, kind of as Louis touched on earlier, keeping your devices up to date and healthy is a key part of achieving these compliance objectives. And so we have pre-built query packs that allow you to get an understanding of where you are and how you can, you know, achieve your compliance.
Sorry, quick video. It's going to take you through kind of a use case of what one of our European customers is doing around ensuring compliance.
Launching some new stuff today. But first, I'm going to get my slide to move. Nope, not that way. How many product marketers does it take to figure out a slideshow? It's a question I've had in my mind often. All right, we're gonna play a game because it's time for a game. You listen to a lot of talks, right? Pretend you're a threat actor. Now take off your good person hat, put on your I'm an evil person hat. Billie Eilish is playing in the background. I'm a bad guy. Okay. Your target organization uses phishing-resistant credentials, whether that be YubiKeys or FIDO2 keys. What are you going to do to breach them? Don't be afraid to try them. And you cannot hold the CEO hostage. That is, we don't condone violence.
Email someone in their financial department.
Very good. Very good. Phishing. Easiest path.
Push on.
Oh, a deep sigh. Push bomb. Yes, I agree. However, all of these answers are leading to a phishing-resistant credential, right? So theoretically, you should be blocked. So we were thinking about this a lot. And I don't know if you've ever had flooding in your house. I recently had a flood. My landlord came over, vented about how the water will go the easiest path. So all of a sudden you'll have like a ceiling crumbling across the room from you, right? So attackers work the same way. If you can't phish them, if you can't push bomb them, they will pick the next easiest target, which is that credential has a life cycle. A credential, a beautiful, passwordless, phishing-resistant credential is born, and then it can be extended, right? We have this concept of, I want to use my mobile device to log on to Salesforce to see my marketing reports or whatever it is, and that's a legitimate use case for a credential extension. And then a credential can be lost, and it needs to be recovered. So if you can't phish a credential, what you can do if you're a bad actor generally is the second easiest option, which is social engineering. And you would social engineer specific points in the credential's life cycle. Enrollment, when the credential gets enrolled. So I'm going to call IT and I'm going to say, hey, I am on the road at BeyondCon and I need to access blah, 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 blah. Can you please send a new credential? Or extension, getting an end user to extend a legitimate credential to your endpoint. Dun, dun, very bad. And then the third opportunity in that credential lifecycle is recovery. And this is basically what happened in the MGM breach, which I think we all know here, which is, you call the help desk and say, hey, I lost my credential, and now you have to recover it. That's what you would do, right? So at Beyond Identity, when we talk about being security first and phishing resistant, we don't just want to cover that credential, as important as it is. We also want to cover every aspect of the credential's lifecycle, because those are vulnerable points that bad actors can attack. Which is why today we are introducing this concept of a secure identity lifecycle. Again, that credential is born, is used, is extended, and then it's recovered, right? All of these are critical points of a credential operation. So we've always sort of had this notion of secure enrollment and extension. However, what we've done is two things. One, we've introduced additional functionality and optimizations for secure enrollment and secure extension. Specifically for enrollment, we now have high assurance enrollment methods that go through your existing IDP. For secure extension, we have now we are running policy on both devices, right? So it's not just the device that has the passkey, it's also the device that wants a passkey. And then last but certainly not least, and this is where I'm going to hand it over to our partners at Nametag and Sarah, is secure recovery. So beyond identity, we want to focus really on access management, right? Identity proofing, identity verification is an adjacent market that we need friends to kind of tackle and to provide you the most holistic, integrated solution. So we are introducing a set of identity proofing partnerships, the first and only of which is Nametag. And this allows you to verify the end user against their real-life credential, securing every step of the credential's lifecycle. I think I have a video here for what secure extension looks like, and I'm hoping that video is locally downloaded. And I'm going to click, and then magic is going to happen. In the meantime, Noah and Sarah, if you want to come to the stage, because actually, you know what? Let's just go to Noah and Sarah's presentation. I'll show them the video. Well, no, I have a different video.
We have a different video.
Yeah, It's all good. You're gonna get super excited. All right. So Sarah is our director of product strategy, and she leads an excellent team that is forming the standards of today and tomorrow. And of course, Noah is me, but at Nametag, the director of product marketing, and they're going to talk to us about how we're going to unlock via our partnership the secure identity lifecycle.
It's been a while since I've used one of these that wasn't attached to my AirPods, so bear with me here. So hi folks, I'm Noah. I'm the head of product marketing at Nametag. We're an identity verification company, as you probably guessed. Right? There we go. All right. So there were a bunch of concepts that were just introduced to you in the space of about 63 seconds in that demo video, and so I want to walk you through, if you will, what you just saw. So as Sarah said, the passkey enrollment and recovery processes are pretty critical points of vulnerability in the MFA lifecycle. What we like to say, MFA is only as secure as its reset process. We saw this with the MKM breach, not to bring that up again. What we've heard from our customers is that this actually happens quite frequently. Somebody will call the help desk saying, hi, I'm Noah, I'm on the IT team, I've been locked out of my account, I need you to reset my credentials so I can get back in. So what we're doing is protecting the credential and all of the lifecycle operations associated with it using Nametag identity verification. So this surrounds your existing Beyond Identity environment and processes. All a user has to do instead of contacting their help desk if they drop their phone in the lake is go to a little microsite, verify their identity through Nametag, and then they can reset or recover their passkey. And the enrollment flow works basically the same way. So there's lots of benefits here, but as you can imagine, the end result or the goal is to prevent breaches and reduce IT support costs by giving the users a lot more self-service options for managing their own credentials. So this went by really quickly on the screen in the demo video, so let me talk you through how this actually works. We like to say that this is a security control that reduces friction. Verifying your identity with Nametag is super fast and easy, and we'll talk about the technology behind this, but the basic user flow is where I want to start. As a user, all I need to do is scan QR code, then scan my government-issued photo ID. We support around 10,000 forms of ID document from 250-something unique issuing authorities, so national governments and other sources from all around the world. We scan your ID, we ask you to take a selfie, we verify both captures, we compare the two, we make sure that you really are who you're claiming to be. On average, this takes about under 30 seconds for a first-time user who's never done this before. And increasingly what we're seeing is that as this sort of technology gets rolled out across a lot of banking applications, users are increasingly familiar with this flow.